AnxietyCenter.com podcasts, where we talk about everything anxiety, as well as other medical, mental, behavioral, parenting, and nutritional health topics. Thank you for joining us. We hope you find today's podcast interesting and inspiring. Here are your hosts, Jim and Marilyn Folk.
Hi, my name is Jim Folk.
And I'm Marilyn Folk.
We are the founders of AnxietyCenter.com.
We just want to welcome everyone. This is our very first inaugural podcast, right, Jim?
It is. Yes, it is. The very first one.
Yeah, we hope that you're going to find our podcast helpful. And we're really excited that you're joining in with us and we can journey together on that road to lasting wellness.
We also hope you follow along with us as we talk about all things anxiety, as well as other medical, mental, behavioral, parenting, relationship, and nutritional health topics. We have an ambitious agenda and we're looking forward to it. So why don't we just jump right in?
Sure. Now, when we started, Jim and I, we started talking about, where we want to go with the podcasts. And, it's such a big topic. It was hard to decide where to start. And so we kind of identified what the beginning would be, kind of looking at the basics. So in looking at that, we came up with two questions that we thought were important to answer. And so the first question is, what is anxiety? And of course, the second one is, why does anxiety turn into a disorder?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion about the real cause of anxiety and anxiety disorder, and much of this confusion stems from misunderstanding and speculation and out-and-out misinformation. And over the course of the last 20 years, we've seen lots of different views of anxiety disorder. So we thought we'd like to present the real view so some of this confusion is cleared up.
Yeah, we've often heard about this whole chemical imbalance in the brain. And so that's something that, when I work with my clients, I often get this question and this belief kind of surfaces in our discussions. Now, it was said that there's a neurotransmitter called serotonin and it was too low. And because of that, that's why people were anxious. So, for the last 20 years or so, problematic anxiety has been treated with anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications. Now, based on our own struggles with problematic anxiety and our own recovery, we know that the chemical imbalance theory just isn't true.
No, and it's always been a theory. It's never been proven. It's a concept that was put forward many years ago, and unfortunately it was adopted so quickly. We're not going to get into all of the details and reasons why the theory was so pervasive, but suffice to say, it was challenged over the last 4 or 5 years by independent research, including ourselves. We've been challenging that notion for a number of years now, and finally, after all this time, on July 11th, 2011, the chemical imbalance theory was officially put to rest. And,
yay!
Yep, after all this time, by a Dr. Ronald Pies, who is the editor-in-chief emeritus of the Psychiatric Times, when he dismissed the theory in the July 11th issue of the Times with this admission. I'm just going to read it to you because I want to make sure I quote him correctly. Mm-hmm. We quote him as saying, "In the past 30 years, I don't believe I have ever heard a knowledgeable, well-trained psychiatrist make such a preposterous claim," which is about the chemical imbalance theory, "except perhaps to mock it." He goes on to say, "And yes, the chemical imbalance image has been vigorously promoted by some pharmaceutical companies, often to the detriment of our patients' understanding." He further says, "In truth, the chemical imbalance notion was always a kind of an urban legend, never a theory seriously propounded by well-informed psychiatrists."
Interesting. And another thing is that these pharmaceutical companies, now that they've been challenged, now they're looking back and saying, well, they've only used this whole chemical imbalance theory as a metaphor, and that it really wasn't ever intended to be understood as an actual imbalance. While we welcome their admissions, it's glad to hear that, they're finally admitting that it wasn't the actual truth. We take issue with the denial of their role in the proliferation of the chemical imbalance theory. They had a great deal to do with the spread of that whole notion. So why else did antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications soar to multiple billions of dollars each year in sales? Well, because people were told by their doctors and mental health professionals that they needed them to correct a chemical imbalance. So history kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah, and we also take issue with the pharmaceutical companies' stance that they use the chemical imbalance theory notion as a metaphor only. I mean, from 2002 to 2010, many pharmaceutical company websites and their mass marketing campaigns had elaborate illustrations showing what they portrayed as the actual chemical imbalance needing correcting. I don't know if you remember all the advertisements on TV with the chemicals going back and forth and saying you need this medication to correct this imbalance, but they were pretty clear that this was just not a metaphor. Now, that said, the chemical imbalance theory is dead, finally, and we're
Yay.
thankful for that. And it couldn't have reached its demise soon enough, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, too many people have succumbed to the false notion and its implications for their lives. And that's the sad part. I mean, even today, many of our clients are still having to work to undo the damage of the chemical imbalance theory and what that means to them.
Certainly.
Now, we can go into great detail, but for more information, you can, about the chemical imbalance theory and its demise, you can visit our website, and especially this page specifically. It's www.anxietycenter.com. Keep in mind that Anxiety Center has the Canadian spelling of center, so it's CENTRE.com, and then / and these are all capitals now, FAQ / and these are all lowercase, chemical-imbalance theory.shtml. And if you want to have a good read, you can go there. And we have a little bit of information on our page and then a PDF file. I think it's like 17, 18 pages long about the history of how this all came about. Now, when you go and do that, certainly have a read, and we put it in PDF format so you can print it off and take it to your doctors if you like, because there's still a lot of people in the medical profession who strongly believe the chemical imbalance theory is still true, which is very sad.
It is very, very sad.
So that said, on with the truth about anxiety.
Yeah, so let's get back to answering that first question. So what is anxiety? Well, Jim, I've looked up in the Webster's Dictionary, and the definition it gives is this. It says, a state of apprehension, uncertainty, and fear resulting from the anticipation of a realistic or fantasized threatening event or situation. So based on this definition, anxiety results when we imagine that an event or situation in our future is threatening. So in other words, when we imagine that an event or situation could place us in harm's way, well, we become anxious. Now, we have a little bit of a different definition, and our definition says a physiological, psychological, and emotional state that results when we behave in an apprehensive manner.
Yeah, and our description is a bit more detailed because, as we'll talk about it in later segments, that there is a physiological response when we're anxious. And so even though our behaviors are worrisome, there is a biological consequence. And that's why we sort of tied all these together. And of course, as we think in a certain direction, our emotions go there. So there's also an emotional portion as well. So we've sort of summed them all up together. But in other words, the state of being anxious results when we behave in an apprehensive manner. That's it. It's,
I've worked with clients who have been concerned because they say that, well, my symptoms feel real, but how can they feel real if it's all in my head, right? And this is part of the physiological response. The symptoms that we experience are real.
Absolutely, yeah, you bet, yeah. And we're definitely going to talk more about that again in a later segment. And people say, well, what do you mean by apprehensive behavior? Well, worry is apprehensive behavior. I mean, again, as you mentioned, worry is all about imagining that something can harm us. And when we imagine that, of course, we set off the emergency response, and that gets the anxiety going, and away we go. So, again, when we worry, we become anxious. Now, we have to keep in mind that almost everyone is anxious from time to time. And that's why anxiety is not caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain or any other cause. It's caused by a certain style of behavior. And again, this is also why anxiety is not caused by a biological problem in the brain, faulty brain, or genetic predisposition, because since everyone is anxious at times, that would mean that all of us have these flaws. Again, but that's not the case.
Right.
People only attributed problematic anxiety to a biological, chemical, or genetic problem because they didn't understand anxiety, and they don't know why problematic anxiety occurs, so they come up with these kind of concepts and ideas. Again, fortunately, they're untrue.
Right. Now, since all of us here at anxietycenter.com had experienced problematic anxiety ourselves, and we had to work through the process of overcoming it, we have a really clear understanding that problematic anxiety isn't caused by anything else other than overly apprehensive behavior. So again, let's just, sum this up. Anxiety is a physiological, psychological, and emotional state that results when we behave in an apprehensive manner. So worry is an example of apprehensive behavior. Now, when does anxiety turn into a disorder? Well, it turns into a disorder, like a disruption to normal functioning, when behaving apprehensively interferes with our normal lifestyle.
Yeah, we always have to keep in mind that the term disorder is just a term used to describe when a behavior causes a disruption to normal functioning. I'll just repeat that. A disorder is just a term used to describe when a behavior causes a disruption to normal functioning. Anxiety disorder, then, should not be mistaken to mean a medical, biological, or genetic condition. And unfortunately, a lot of people do make that mistake. And again, anxiety disorder is a phrase used to describe someone who's having issues with anxiety, and those issues are interfering with the normal lifestyle. Now, years ago, anxiety disorder was called being a worrywart. And so if you go to the doctor and you said, well, I'm having some issues here, and the doctor would say, well, you worry too much, you just need to go home and stop worrying so much. That was it.
Right. Easy to say, a little harder to do, hey?
It is, yeah. And unfortunately today, now it's this imbalance and you need this medication to correct it, and maybe it's genetic and you'll never get over it. Have all of these other things added to it when in fact they're not even true.
Right. And, with the genetic condition, it's interesting about this one is that if it were genetic, then how do you explain that we've healed?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, over the last 60 years, anxiety has been medicalized, and it's, become perceived as something that is actually not. So again, anxiety is not a medical problem that needs drugs to fix. It's a behavior problem, and that requires behavioral change.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you and I did when we overcame our struggle with problematic anxiety. I mean, neither you or I went for blood transfusions to fix a chemical imbalance. We weren't shocked to have our brains straightened out. We didn't have operations to fix the faulty parts of the brain, and nor did we have gene replacement therapy to replace our faulty genes. We overcame our struggle with problematic anxiety by first understanding what anxiety is and how it affects the body. And then second, by identifying the behaviors that cause us to behave overly anxiously. And of course, then third, we worked at making appropriate behavioral changes.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Jim. And this is the approach that we use with our members and clients to help them overcome a struggle with problematic anxiety. Now, we've had great success over the years because we approach the problem for what it is, and then we help our members and clients make appropriate behavioral change.
Absolutely, yeah. So once again, to be clear, anxiety is a physiological, psychological, and emotional state that results when we behave in an apprehensive manner. So to eliminate problematic anxiety, we have to learn and then apply healthy behavioral approach to adversity, uncertainty, and risk. And that's our problem. We've learned to respond to those in a very unhealthy way through worry and fretting and being upset, which then gets the body going.
Right.
So if we want to eliminate problematic anxiety, we have to approach the adversity, uncertainty, and risk in a much less anxious manner. And that's what makes all the difference. And if you want more information about this, you can visit our website at, again, anxietycenter.com. You can join our recovery support area. I mean, we explain all of this in great detail there. We spend a lot of time and energy putting that information together so people actually knew the truth about anxiety so they could move forward and help themselves correct it. So if you want to visit there and have a look, we have this all explained.
Also, when we use these anxious behaviors, it can get our body really stirred up. And once that happens, we really begin to experience sensations and symptoms that are very uncomfortable. And, as a result of this overly apprehensive behavior. And so we're going to be addressing this topic in our next episode. So stay
Absolutely,
tuned.
yeah, because it's very important. You bet. Yeah. We just wanted to add one more thing for today in this episode here is that we understand, over the years as we've been talking about the chemical imbalance being a myth, we've received a lot of resistance because, the chemical imbalance was so pervasive in society. Everyone believed it to be true. And so when we were challenging it, we had a lot of resistance. I remember a seminar we did where we had lots of people come up and say, oh, you guys are just, dead wrong on this, and how can you be so, incorrect? But because of our own recoveries and because we've helped so many people over all these years, we know what works and doesn't work, and the chemical imbalance wasn't even a factor. And so I understand why some people may be a bit resistant about the change in this approach, but we just encourage you to embrace it, because if a person wants to get better, we can. It's really just making behavioral change. Now, I understand that some people can really believe it's out of their control, because that's certainly how it can feel. But it's not that it is out of our control, it's that we don't know how to control it. And that's what we help our clients learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening in to this episode, and we look forward to your joining us again for future episodes.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to episode number 2. If you have any questions, certainly don't hesitate to send them along, and we'll address those as we talk about anxiety. Thanks so much.
Bye now.